What's up, guys? Thomas Mott here alongside Josh Davis. Welcome to an early edition of the Wednesday Linc Live. And it's early, Josh, because we have our first official OTA practice that media members were able to see. And so we got our first real look at the 2024 Philadelphia Eagles. There's a lot to go ahead and break down. First off, welcome you in. We haven't talked in a while. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yes, it is. It has been a minute, and the trip looked amazing. So again, congratulations. We've texted, obviously, behind the scenes, but the official Wednesday Linc. Congratulations to you guys. What a blast! But you're right. We are here. Eagles OTAs. Actually, speaking of, getting to see each other, being able to see the team, being able to see the
Yeah.
Eagles out there on the field. There's so many places that we can go with this thing, but honestly, to me, and maybe unsurprisingly, like the Saquon, seeing him out there in an Eagles
Sure.
jersey, the hype is unreal, and it's going to continue to be that way all of this through the season. But let's go. We got Eagles OTAs are here. We're getting footage.
Now, we got to go ahead and first at least mention something that is going to be all over the headlines, has been so far in Twitter, the fact that James Bradberry was not at the Eagles' voluntary, keyword there, voluntary OTA
Yes.
practice
Yep.
today. Jerry Slay spoke about that, says he's not very concerned. He says James Bradberry is very eager to get back to his form and also help out the younglings and all sorts of good things about his running made a cornerback. But it is worth noting as people will immediately go, oh, Bradberry, he's unhappy because they drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Isaiah Rodgers and this and that. In reality, there were a bunch of Eagles who did miss today, including Lane Johnson, including Devontae Smith, no CJ Uzama, no Jake Elliott. Like, there were a bunch of Eagles who did miss today's OTA practice, and so Bradberry not being there is going to grab headlines, and that was kind of as it was presented on Twitter, like, ooh, no James Bradberry, drama. In reality, not a big deal. Your takeaway on that as well.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It is understandably, right, because of all the speculation, and we're
Sure.
saying, is James Bradberry going to make this team? And oh my gosh, he's not there. But yes, to temper it with the expectations, the other names, like you mentioned, that were also not there. And you got to remember, these are players that are, if anything, quite honestly, I would say it's more surprising that a Keely Ringo is not there than James
Yeah.
Bradberry. Now, he might have had
Yeah.
other family obligations and everything else. So again, it is voluntary. But, you have a younger player that's like, you're trying to prove yourself. You show up. It's only your second year in the league. You would probably try to be there. So again, who knows what's going on? And hopefully all things are well and nothing, crazy. But you're right. I mean, Bradbury not being there, it is going to grab headlines. The talk is sure. And it doesn't change my mindset. I mean, I think that we're kind of in the similar of like, okay, look, is he going to be on this roster? Personally, I don't think so. You look at
Yeah.
all the acquisitions, you look at the through the draft, it feels unlikely, but this is to me not as much of oh, he's not there, so it's a for sure he's already on his way out or he's disgruntled or anything like that. It's just, again, to your point, it's voluntary. You don't have to be there like some of the other guys, so not a huge deal from that side.
Well, and Bradberry's going to lose his job during training camp. He's not going to lose it during OTAs if
For
he's
sure.
actually going to be beat out by Quinyon Mitchell or Isaiah Rodgers. Rodgers notably was the starting cornerback opposite of Darius Slay today, meaning that he's third in line to actually starting. And so what would actually have to happen for James Bradberry if he's going to be, on the roster but not a starting cornerback is he slowly gets beat out during training camp and eventually Quinyon Mitchell or eventually Isaiah Rodgers takes that spot. So when you look at the overall news that you're going to get, basically get from today, all the depth chart stuff is kind of hard to actually read into because everyone who's an established veteran is going to be a starter, and everyone who's a rookie is not going to be a starter, hence why Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean were cornerback number 2 and nickel cornerback number 2, respectively. And so from that standpoint, we can't take a lot away. I do think the fact that Nakobe Dean not practicing and Zack Baun being the other starting outside
There you
linebacker
go.
is very interesting, and you've talked about him a lot on your show. What were your thoughts on that today?
I was excited to see it, yes, and people are going to, come at me right now because they're going to be like, "Oh, it's still not happening, right?" It's super early, so I
Sure.
understand that. But yes, like one of the questions, there's lots of questions going into OTAs here of, but what is Fangio going to do with a linebacker? And he talked about, hey, we don't see any reason why Zack Baun can't play inside linebacker, but to just go ahead and say, all right, you know what, you're going to be the inside linebacker with Devin White.
Right.
First initial period where media is actually able to see and record and everything else. But it's 7-on-7s. You got Zack Baun, you got Devin White. See what they can do. Now, of course, yeah, Nakobe is recovering from the Lisfranc injury. Those things are serious. Everyone, I think, understands that and knows that. But it's notable. And I think that, you read the tea leaves, or I was trying to previously in the press conference of Fangio is a vet. He knows what he's doing when he talks to the
Right.
media. You don't just throw a name out there and go, oh, well, they won't take it and run with it. Like, that is telling someone, okay, well, you think highly of a guy like a Zack Baun. So I don't know. We will see like where this carries or where this leads on to, but it feels more than I guess I should say there's something to it. Will he be the starter? Who
Sure.
knows? But it's worthwhile, like you mentioned, for being the actually out there, as a first team reps or getting the first team reps. So, and I think it also answers the question as well because there's speculation of is he going to be the like backup edge rusher? Will he play some of
Yeah.
that? If injuries happen, maybe you do it, but it feels like there's your answer. He's okay. No, this is a linebacker chance. This is a guy who's going to play off ball. And does he start? Maybe. And if not, then he's your immediate backup. I would think that's where this direction's going.
I think Vic Fangio really started to maybe reveal a little bit more about what his defensive philosophy is going to be, just based on, like we just said, Zack Baun being one of the starting outside linebackers with Nakobe Dean being out, Vontae Maddox getting a little bit of run at safety, a little bit of run at cornerback today. This whole idea, too, in the news this week that, Dolphin players are really glad that he's gone, and Dolphin players were really upset that he wasn't that friendly, and all this slander of Vic Fangio has been really crazy. And that Darius Slay's comments today, which I'm sure we'll talk about on both of our shows later on tonight for the full recaps. Be sure to stay tuned for that. I think Slay and even Jalen Carter had some pretty darn good, quotes and words of wisdom on Fangio, saying he's a nice guy, he's a guy that demands respect, and he's a guy that wants you to work hard. And for a defense that didn't have a lot of those things last year, especially the respect of their defensive coordinator, I mean, it seemed like just the whole real writing on the wall was no one really respected Sean Desai. It's a different mindset and a different overall scheme coming into this Eagle defense, and I'm pumped for him to be there, and I don't need him to be my best friend. I need him to have a very good defense that doesn't get run or thrown all over the place like they did this past season.
Please, yes. It's just something, some semblance of
Yeah,
what you're doing and actually have the respect of those guys. So yes, I mean, you know what? No one's going to be, I guess this is the thing, right? Like anyone and everyone who's had any job for that matter is like, you're not going to love every single boss.
sure.
Now, you know what? And not everyone's going to get along, but in a competitive sport where you're asking a lot from these players and play at the very highest level, sure, if he's going to require a ton from you, I would rather a guy who's asking that from my players and also showing up in the building to lead by example. Because it's not like he's saying, "Hey, I need you in the building at all times, and I'm gonna be at home, I'm gonna be relaxed and just chilling." Like Fangio never leaves. Like that's the comments from everyone. Is like he expects you to work as hard as he does, and that's fine. Like you are a professional making millions and millions of dollars. And especially what we saw this past season, I think most of us would agree that you need a little bit of a wake up call. And you say, hey, you know
Yeah,
what? This is what it takes to be a professional. This is what it takes to show up with consistency. Hopefully, maybe, you got players actually buying into it. I think you do. And to your point, I mean, how great was the Jalen Carter press conference? Because he's raving about it, saying, I'm an old school guy. I like the play. I like the coach in Vic Fangio. He even talked to some Miami players. So it's not like all of them hate him. It's
yeah,
just, sure, you know what? Some guys that maybe the new age, I don't know if that's the right wording for it, but some of the less like in your face or requiring a lot from the film breakdown and things like that.
sure.
Because Fangio doesn't really get demonstrative. It's just more so like, hey, he's going to ask you to stay up on the film, stay up on the studying, make sure
Yeah.
you're ready to go and be able to make an impact. So I'm excited about it. It's going to be drastically different. I just I don't know. The more that we hear, the more that we see. I think that we already knew that he was the right man for the job, but
Right.
the whole Javon Holland thing to me is kind of like, all right, cool, whatever. You can say whatever you want. Like I don't care. It does not bother me one bit. There's not any concern in my mind because you got a lot of young
Yeah.
guys here who are hungry, and I think that they're going to take that and just run with it in his defense. It's going to be great.
And he still had a top 10 defense with the Dolphins last year. As much as they hated him, they were still one of the better units in the National Football League. And so, again, I think TG with the soda said defensive coordinators should have a little roughness to them. I couldn't agree
There you go.
more. And I think a young defensive group like Philadelphia is and will be this season, they're going to need some pretty hard coaching to make sure that they don't, slack off a little bit. They stay focused because if there's going to be a weakness on this team, defense is where it's going to be. Special teams is going to be fine. The offense seemingly is going to be great. It's defense is where you could have a little bit of a slow start, and they need to not have a slow start because of the schedule that they have, obviously beginning with the Green Bay Packers down there in Brazil. We talk about offense. It's really hard to break down the offense on one day of OTAs with 7-on-7s. They're not wearing pads. There's one big takeaway, though, that I had today, Josh, and that was motion and Jalen Hurts being under center. So really two big takeaways. These are two things that the Eagles don't do. Jalen Hurts was under center like 7% of snaps last year, worst in the National Football League. And all the ones when he was under center was basically him doing brotherly shoves. You've detailed this on your channel as well. I really think the Kellen Moore overall offensive system, we got a really, really small preview today, but what I saw so far has been pretty good.
It's almost one of those, you see it and you're like, hang on, what was
Yeah, what
that?
is
Right?
that?
Like that's
Right.
what we want to see, but it's like, okay, thank you. I'm not sure that I recognize. I believe that's what we were going for. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, to your point, it's like, how incredible is that going to be? Because you have variation, you have motion. And like you say, lots of reports coming out about the motion that were utilized even in 7-on-7s. And the whole point to it, the whole purpose, which you and I have said for forever, all the way last season, talking about it every single show. It's like, look, motion is not always like, hey, you got to do motion to end up running a play to that side. Sometimes it's just
Right.
getting information from the defense. And it's like Sirianni would kind of talk about it, but never believe in it because we never saw it. And so it's going to be drastically different already. You can tell, but the difference that Kellen Moore makes on this offense, and you also see the confidence, or you will see from this team, it's going to be night and day difference. So I'm pumped for it. But again, just the fact of the first initial OTA session, and you're already getting the takeaways of saying, all right, things look different. That's what
Yeah.
we'd hope for. The question still, comes back to, like, how involved is Sirianni? How much does he have to go, well, let's tone this thing back, right? Or is it hey, Kellen Moore, do your thing. This is what you do. You've had success in it, and you just go run with it. That is the hope, that the OC gets the final say on everything. But we will see. But again, to your point, I mean, seeing Saquon with Jalen under center, handoff to Saquon, you fake the handoff, you hit it on the wheel route, or you hit it on a swing pass. Like, there's so many different options, and the looks are going to be different. And I mean, good luck to the defenses, because this squad. I mean, we've made the case several times, but it's like, what other team out there has as dominant of offensive players?
Right.
Like, you can't name another team. I'm sorry. Like, yeah, sure, we're biased, but you can't name objectively another team that is at the level that the Eagles are with playmaker. Like, their playmakers combined with that O-line. I'm sorry. Like, there may be close. You could put other teams up there that are close to that extent, but there's no one that is. So you get that combined with Kellen Moore at the offensive coordinator. The sky is really the limit. There may be some growing pains, but to see those changes is, I mean, it's icing like cake. It's the best thing ever so far. We're super early, I know, but it's very thrilling to see.
A couple of other position group, at least battles that we had so far today. And again, you're basically going to put your veterans in the starting roles, and then the people challenging are going to be the backup role. That'll all change once training camp starts at the end of July. Tyler Steen was your starting right guard today. That seems to be his spot to lose. I mean, obviously, Trevor Keegan can beat him out in a couple of months, but he's not going to do it today, tomorrow, or the rest of OTAs to end this month. Parris Campbell was your wide receiver 3. He was targeted multiple times by Jalen Hurts during 7-on-7s, and multiple reporters said he looked bigger than they thought, a little bit faster than he thought. I think he's kind of the leader in the clubhouse for wide receiver 3. But Anais Smith, the rookie out of Texas A&M, still isn't practicing, recovering from his injury, and so he's been on the sideline just kind of watching practices so far, and so we don't get to kind of have the straight-up Campbell versus Smith battle for wide receiver 3 that we expect during training camp. But a couple of other notable who's starting here, who's starting there sort of stuff was answered today during OTAs.
Yes, and that was, again, all the things that you wanted on that side. I kind of go back and forth of, I mean, you mentioned Parris Campbell, right? So
Yeah.
definitely a weapon. The speed, that's great. Takeaways there. We're a million days, it feels like, which we kind of sped through a portion, but now it's going to slow to a crawl. Like,
It's going to slow.
it's going to be nice, sure, to get some of this OTA footage, but then it's going to be like, oh my gosh, the summer is the longest thing ever, which is weird because, like, back whenever you're in school, you're like, oh, summer break, that's awesome. Now it's like terrible because we wait for forever for football season. But to your point, you're going to have a lot of time of Anais Smith getting a returning back. Is he going to be able to push for the job? Is he able to win out the wide receiver 3, or is it kind of a, back and forth, Parris Campbell with some snaps, you throw in Anais Smith with a couple packages? You had a great breakdown, I think, right before. Was it right before you left?
It was.
I think it was. Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, I thought that was, with, just the weapon that Anais Smith is. And I think everyone recognizes that. But it's like, I get the whole comment of, he is a rookie, sure. So maybe there's a tempering expectations there. But I mean, I'm curious just with, yes, it's great. Parris Campbell hype, understandable. He might be the wide receiver 3, but when, it'll be soon. But if and when Anais Smith is recovered and returns from injury, like, what's not to like about the potential of him as wide receiver 3 on this offense?
I mean, at this point, you got to at least understand that a wide receiver 3 does not get a lot of feature, right? I mean, Quez Watkins,
Right.
historically, as your wide receiver 3, is getting like 20 to 25 catches a season. And so for those of them saying Anai Smith is a rookie and it's too much for him to handle, there's not going to be a lot for him to handle. Olamide Zaccheaus had very few games, the Buffalo game and that first Bucs game where you said, oh yeah, we have Olamide Zaccheaus on this roster. So you're not asking him to do a lot, but he comes in with everything you would want in a third string or a wide receiver 3 in this offense. He can obviously move motion right to left with Kellen Moore scheming, and he can run after catch. And he can be a guy that you hit across the middle, and he takes a 10-yard pass for 35 yards or 45 yards. And they also had him kind of standing by punt returns, at least today during OTAs. Covey and also Cooper DeJean were doing that as well. And so I'm sure they're going to use him as a punt returner, or at least try him out as a punt returner in training camp, dating back to his history of playing at Texas A&M. But I think he has all the tools to make it happen. The problem is, as we've mentioned, many times before, it is tough to learn wide receiver in this league. A lot of rookies, especially not first rounders, come into the National Football League as a wide receiver, and it takes a year or two. And when you already have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith to mentor these guys, it helps. But Parris Campbell should really feel confident in the fact that he's going to be really given the wide receiver 3 until proven otherwise, until it's clearly taken away from him. And even if Campbell does win in the 3 spot, Smith should win the 4 spot, and then Johnny Wilson mixes in on certain, jump ball packages, or we need a big physical receiver, goal line packages. The wide receiver core, I don't think, is as bad as people say. And I did a breakdown on the show yesterday, just looking around the free agent market. If we had to get somebody to replace Devontae Parker, there really isn't anybody. I mean, Hunter Renfrow is a name that's out there, but the fact that no one else has signed Hunter Renfrow has got to be somewhat concerning to you, because I think he's good. You think he's good, can't stay healthy, and yet no one wants him right now. That's surprising. Right. Michael Thomas is 31 years old. There just isn't a name out there that goes, oh, go get this guy. And I think instead they're going to say, hey, Smitty will have 100 catches. A.J. Brown will have 85 to 290 catches. Dallas Goedert will have 50-plus catches. Like, they are 100% going to have plenty of guys getting targets. And then they can sit back and go, okay, Anais, we need you to have 3 catches a game. Or Johnny Wilson, we're going to have 2 targets a game. Or Parris Campbell, 5 catches a game. Whatever it is. And they'll just kind of build the wide receiver room around that overall. I think they're going to be just fine. But I think right now Parris Campbell is the leader until we get to training camp. And, of course, everything changes.
Yeah. I'm with you. I do agree with that. I for right now, he's the clubhouse leader. It's his job to lose, or I suppose you could word it as his job to earn, as Tyler Steen did. I like that wording of his, talking about right guard. It's similar situation. It's his job to earn. It's his job to lose, whatever.
Right.
But, there's lots of time. And Highsmith, Smith, maybe I love that option because of the reason that you pointed out there and also in your previous video. Because he is a weapon. He's a ridiculous weapon for this offense. And if you use him the right way, which I believe Kellen Moore can, as opposed to, what we've seen previously with some other guys, but Kellen Moore can, it's going to be dangerous. But even still, it's not a rookie expectation. Like you said, you're not bringing him here and say, hey, you to have a successful season, you need to have 60 catches. Like Olamide Zaccheaus had 10 catches last season. I mean, a successful season for Anai Smith is with this group, assuming no one gets injured, but with this group, like 30 catches, 35 catches. I mean, that realistically, I don't know that you're going to get much more than that. So I'd say, you know what, make the most of your ability. The yards after catch is ridiculous. If you put him in the right spots, especially with the defense, probably not keying off of him much because you got to guard A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, everyone else there. So there's a lot to like about the offense, but you do have several options. So definitely excited there. Right guard, again, it's another battle potential. It is Tyler Steen's job to lose. I liked his mindset. I will say that about the presser, talking about like he reflected basically coming off of last season, saying like, I'm going to get in as good of a shape as I can be. I understand more of what it takes to play guard. He didn't say it was like just a total to play guard. It was more so just in the NFL. But I think you kind of read between the lines of, all right, you had your first year, you had your welcome to the NFL. Right. He even admitted, like in the start that he had, he wished he had played better. He didn't think it was as good as it could have been. But you got an understanding there. And so, you know what? You come back for year 2. It's your job to lose and see what he can do. Now, I love competition. I think everyone does, certainly from the videos that we've seen. I mean, how great is it that we've got these, not that it really translates maybe to football, but you still have push-up contests and like hanging from the pull-up bar and like the biking one, I think, and whatever the other holding the weight, Sidney Brown and Kenny Gainwell. So just to see all the competition, but iron sharpens iron and all that. So Trevor Keegan, possibility there. there's been talk and speculation of Mekhi Becton, but I think he's swing tackle, right? Like there's not
Yeah.
a legit going for guard. I mean, you can't put anything, I guess, past Stoutland, but
Sure.
Becton's he's swing tackle, right? I mean, that's
Becton's swing tackle, and Becton is one of these moves that Howie makes to make sure that if week 11, heaven forbid, Jordan Mailata goes down or Lane Johnson goes down, knock on wood it doesn't happen, they don't have nobody standing behind him and saying, okay, well, now the left side of the offensive line is screwed because we don't have Jordan Mailata. That's what Mekhi Becton, in my opinion, is really there for. He's not going to compete with anybody. He'll be your swing tackle, and then he's really your backup in case of Jason Peters in 2017 happens and Vaitai has to roll in and start a Super Bowl and play just fine. I think Keegan is one of those players that eventually is going to be very good. I think you can't put any expectation on a fifth-round offensive lineman ever in year one, but he has the build of being a really good interior offensive lineman and training under Stoutland, maybe sitting a whole year. I think the expectation for Steen year 1 to year 2 jumps a lot. I think the same will go for Trevor Keegan year 1 to year 2, and he'll really be someone who can compete for the starting spot in the second season. And of course, if Tyler Steen were to struggle halfway through the year, again, you got somebody to go ahead and replace him and give you that sort of overall just ability to not be, again, for lack of a better term, screwed if injuries were to actually happen. I think the real, dark horse battle that you're going to be seeing in training camp is going to be Will Shipley versus, I'm blanking on his name right now, RB2.
Kenny
Gainwell, yes.
Well, depending on who you are.
Depending on who you are, sure. I think that one's going to be interesting. And I think Will Shipley is a very fascinating draft pick that I was kind of confused by whenever it happened there on day 3. The more I watch of what he did at Clemson, the more I kind of go, this just makes a lot of sense. And it really shows you that they weren't very pleased with what Kenny Gainwell did or did not do, gained none during 2023. That's a battle that doesn't have a massive impact on, I'd say, win or lose, right? Like a linebacker battle or like a cornerback battle does. But that's a very interesting battle for me once training camp starts, because right now, you're not going to learn a lot about Will Shipley, but when the pads come on, 11 on 11s, whenever they go to New England and have joint practices with the Patriots, that's going to be fascinating to see if number 39 can beat out Gainwell, who really has his hands full to try to go ahead and be RB2 behind Saquon.
It's it's a great point. It's a kind of an underrated positional battle because you talk about all the others.
There's a lot.
It's not a guarantee. I mean, I think Kenny knows that, right? Like he's probably wanting to go out there and prove, and understandably from last season and how that took place. Because I mean, quite honestly, I think we've talked about this maybe more than once, but at least one time. But it's like if Gainwell had not had the first game and then getting banged up and then Swift being inserted, like who knows how long they would have stuck with Kenny Gainwell to try to force that to work. Like, I mean, there's no telling. Now, obviously that's bygones be bygones and whatever, like last season is anything, but still, like Sirianni loves Kenny Gainwell. Like he loves to try to, he's worn the shirts and everything. Like he's trying to, and he's had his moments. I know everyone understands playoff Kenny. We all understand. We've all seen it. But it's what have you done for me lately? And there's, it's time to prove it. You got to be able to get out there and do that. And maybe Will Shipley, it wouldn't surprise me. I'll say that in agreement with it. Wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden you say, well, there's your RB2 because of his ability and what you see on tape. And Saquon even talked about that in his presser. He said, I love the running back room. We got some competition. Love the guys in there. And heck, if Will Shipley turns into Danny Woodhead just by default of wearing 39, like we'd all be happy with that. So you never know.
I've just really started to get the feeling. I mean, we've known the roster for weeks now, almost a month since the NFL draft. And at the same time, seeing them all on the football field, I think really goes to show the depth that Howie Roseman has built on this team. And it does remind me of 2017. I know that saying Super Bowl this or saying, 14 win that, it's way too early and you got to wait and see. And they could be terrible and it could be a dumpster fire and all sorts of things like that. But in 2017, Howie knew what he had, and so he made sure to go out and get a couple of pieces here and there during the offseason. That way he had depth. Same thing goes for 2022 when he knew he had a very good roster. That's why he brings in Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh halfway through the season. He's just filling holes and kind of doing some preventative care just to make sure that if Fletcher Cox blows his knee, we have Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh will be just fine. It really feels like this roster is being constructed in a very similar way, right? He has the two safeties Safeties also gets Cooper DeJean just to make sure. Sidney Brown's on the roster as well. Cornerbacks, they go from having no cornerbacks to like 14 currently on the roster, and I think 5 of which could be really good starters on the outside. It's crazy. Same goes for wide receivers. Same goes for offensive line. I mean, the list goes on and on. It goes all the way down to quarterback, where they got Kenny Pickett, who looked pretty darn good today. According to reports, they have built a roster that not only is great in terms of the ones, but the twos could be starters on other teams right now. And I'm fascinated to see how all these guys pan out once we get really the pads coming on in training camp, which you mentioned is a ways away. But in reality, I mean, right now, OTAs through the end of May. That's going to be great. Lots to talk about, lots to see, lots of highlights on YouTube and Twitter. June, you die out. June's very, very quiet. End of July, people start reporting, and then August explodes. And so it's going to come a little bit quicker than we think. Let's just hope that it doesn't take as long as, some of the summers it would take whenever we were kids.
True. Total. Yes. In total agreement. It's like a blessing and a curse, right? Because like we don't want just anything to happen just so it's like, oh, hey, there's news out there. But yes, it's kind of like, well, you got a ways to wait. Let's just say you wouldn't necessarily want to have what the Chiefs offseason has looked like so far with just all the mess that they're putting up with. You get extra heat, extra speculation, and all the media attention coming off of 2 Super Bowls, going for 3. It's maybe understandably so, but I don't know what's going on there. It's a blessing. Let's just say it's a blessing to be sitting here talking about, you mentioned the depth. Never really would have imagined saying that, especially in the secondary because of what we were coming off of. But in the draft, you got the free agency moves. I mean, we've talked about it before, but it's like this 53-man roster, if you go through and you try to make your predictions, everyone's going to be wrong on a couple of them, but still you go through, like, you have to leave off some, fairly decent names there. Like, there's going to be players that without a doubt will get cut and immediately another team will pick up. Like, it's going to happen. And so the question is, who can you afford to live without? Who are the right cuts to be made? And that's going to be the fascinating part of training camp is, we're going to come away from one day to the next going, all right, you got competition here. Let's see how it leads up into a preseason game. Is there another situation of an Eli Ricks who didn't have a good camp but performed on game days and made the roster? So there's tons of them. I think that I had this mentioned to me and I forgot to bring it up. So I'm bringing it up to you here now live. So just, like on the spot, but I think that we actually may try to do similar to how we did the NFL draft league for the predictions. I think we may do that for 53-man roster prediction because I got the same site. And so a couple people were asking, so we kind of put it in there basically and say, hey, not a bad idea. Just various questions. And then, do like maybe a jersey giveaway or something for whoever gets the closest.
There you go. I like that idea.
Stay tuned.
Couple of comments here. Doomsday Corner says Bradberry was a no-show at OTAs. If you're just joining us, we're already 30 minutes into our hour live show. Bradberry was a no-show. James Bradberry did not, Darius Slay talked about it at the podium. Wasn't saying it was a big deal. He says, Bradberry's going to be here. He's going to be fine, so on and so forth. But Bradberry wasn't the only Eagle who missed, all of so far OTAs. No Devontae Smith. Unsure why. No Lane Johnson. There was no C.J. Uzomah. No Jake Elliott. There was no Josh Sweat. There were a bunch of Eagles who were not there at a voluntary practice, right? It's a voluntary workout. And while you and I, at least I think most of us would say, hey, new season, new defense, new offense, you need to be at all the voluntary stuff, and the majority of the players were. That's not the case for everybody. Keely Ringo was another player that did miss today. And so Bradberry's name not being at OTAs grabs a lot of headlines. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Does he still, start week 1 in Brazil against the Green Bay Packers? You and I would both say no. We think he could be moved maybe during training camp. But as of right now, if they were going to line it up for a game tomorrow, Bradberry would be the other starting cornerback opposite of Darius Slay because he has the most experience and they still have some level of trust in him, at least outwardly. I don't know what it is behind the scenes, but outwardly they would say he's QB, 1B next to Darius Slay.
Yes, yeah, cornerback. I know you said
that's
QB,
what I meant.
but
Cornerback.
I get you.
Yes, CB.
You're right, but thankfully that's the beauty. Even though we kind of hate on the fact that we have to wait so long, that's the beauty of the fact that we do have so long the regular season because it will change. I'll be shocked if it does not. It's a fair point also, and I'm curious because we only get the glimpses when there's the media days and they actually allow access. But it was interesting because Saquon in his presser, they're asking about the offense, and he was like, "Oh man, it's just exciting to play with these guys."
Right.
You line up in a 7-on-7 huddle like we did, and you got Devontae Smith there, AJ Brown, Dallas Garrett. I don't know if that's just him, because it could be just like talking about the guys you have. It felt like or seemed like he was talking about an actual situation that happened, and so I don't know if it was Smitty was there on Monday and then just decided not to show up today, or what the case is. But again, it's voluntary. Like, guys are going to be there. They're not going to show up. We saw it last season. Several
Yeah,
of the veterans weren't there for a couple of days, then they showed back up. We've got this for the next few weeks. I mean, what next week is on, what is it, like Tuesday, and then, or maybe
I think
Wednesday,
so.
and then like Friday, Saturday, or something like that. So
Right.
it's kind of scattered all over the place. I think to me, the most exciting part is the fact that there's just more OTAs. Like, I understand keep people healthy and, like limit it to a certain extent, like Sirianni's done, but he's gone with more. And
Yeah.
Fangio even said basically that he's been like imploring Sirianni, like, as many as you want to give me. You want to give me as many practices as possible. I will take whatever you want to give me. So it's a difference here, but you're implementing two new systems, or not really, I guess, fully new because of Fangio, but still, it's a different defensive coordinator, different offensive coordinator. You want to make sure guys are on the same page. So why not? I mean, take advantage of it.
Yeah.
I think it's 10, right? Isn't 10 the limit? They're not going to
I
do
think
10, but I think
I
10
think
is
10 is the limit, and they're at
okay.
7
Okay.
or 8, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
So
they're
ability.
they're trying to max it out. And the point that you just made is really the most important point of the next week and a half, the entire month of August in terms of training camp. It's learning these two new systems, because as exciting as they are, and it's very exciting to have Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, we've seen time and time again where it takes a quarterback a year and a half, 2 years to feel comfortable in a system. How many times have we seen in the past where a quarterback gets an OC, he's, okay. Year 2, gets into training camp and says, I speak the language now. Like, I understand what's going on here.
Mhm.
Steichen year 1 with Hurts, Steichen year 2 with Hurts. A massive difference. Now, is that Jalen Hurts' growth, or is that Jalen Hurts learning the offense? We're never really going to know. But time and time again, you do see that the second year in these systems, people are a lot more comfortable. And so for guys like Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley, learning through these OTAs and, of course, during training camp is going to be critical to making sure that a roster that is ready for the Super Bowl today will perform like a roster ready to play for a Super Bowl week 1 against the very, very good and people who have had the same offensive coordinator for the past couple of seasons, Green Bay Packers. And so we can't take this stuff lightly. I know 7-on-7 with no pads is kind of easy to scoff about, and you sit back and go, okay, what are we learning here besides the fact Saquon Barkley looks good in a green 26? But this install stuff is
Right.
happening not just on the field today, but during meetings after practice, during meetings before practice, and all of it is crucial to make sure the Eagles don't have that kind of first-year quarterback or coordinator hangover that we've seen a lot of teams have in the NFL.
Yes, I'm totally right there with you, because it is, again, like you say, we've got a ton of time, and it's not
Yeah,
going to surprise me. Also, I think that understandably, like you mentioned, in a lot of comments that we've gotten, and everyone else is like, if there's some growing pains, it's probably going to happen, right? Because again, of
sure.
those coordinators being there, but you take advantage of as much time as you possibly can. Fangio said it in his initial opening press conference, even though it was like 2 months after he was named the DC. But finally, we got to talk to him.
Right.
And he said it there. He said, you want to basically throw as much as you possibly can at these guys so that they're familiar with it. And then when you get into the season, if you need to change things or you need to kind of shake things up, it's a little bit of a recall. Sure, you're going to have to learn some a little bit, but it's not a on the fly, hey, guess what? We're going to go to a new defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia, and we're going to try to run some of the
Right.
size stuff. We're going to try to implement a little bit of Patricia. It was a total mess, as everyone saw, but it's going to get them on the same page, understand what they're doing, and I think it's going to pay dividends, certainly as the season goes later. I'm curious, though. I mean, this is one of maybe a lot of people's biggest questions, but do you feel like it's more of a offense carrying the defense early on, or is it a defense? In my opinion, it would be a little bit surprising for this way, but is it a defense carrying the offense? Because you make the case of both sides do have to learn and do have to adjust to the new system and play
Yeah.
calling, or is it complementary football? Do you believe it's just kind of both sides doing enough early on? Where are you at?
I think you're going to see defense be a lot better earlier than we would expect, and that's kind of a shock from a lot of people because Fangio's system is very, very, tough to learn, but especially the first couple weeks of training camp, you got to remember defenses always win early. Jalen Hurts will throw interceptions that first week of training camp. People will panic, and the defense will look much, much better. Training camp gets kind of going, and teams start, or the offense starts to figure things out. It should shift, and the offense should start winning training camp versus the defense. When it comes to the actual games, though, I think you're going to see a little bit of hero ball early on from both sides. I think you're going to see A.J. Brown, carry the Eagles in a game. Jalen Hurts' legs carry the Eagles in a game while still having a much better offense than you saw in 2023. But I think once you hit the midseason mark, it should be all, seatbelts off for the Kellen Moore offense. Zero training wheels. They should be doing motion. They should be doing all the great Kellen Moore things that we expect him to do. Runs under center, boot action out of it, throws across the middle, throws deeper, than 20 yards that Kellen Moore is very famous for. It's going to take a little bit of time, but that offense, I think, just based on the star power that it has, can have a slow Jalen Hurts game week 2, but Saquon runs for $130 and AJ has 2 passing touchdowns, and the Eagles win by 15, and it's fine. But I think once you get past, the middle part of the season, or you get to the middle part of the season, it's going to be very, very fascinating to see just how in rhythm this offense can look. And once Kellen Moore starts dialing things up and gets into his rhythm, I hope we see a lot of similar games to when we saw Shane Steichen at his peak performance when the Eagles were just rolling people and putting 30-plus points on the board seemingly every single game.
The fact that whenever you say the Eagles win by 15, my initial thought is I can't remember exactly what that felt like. It's been a while. Because it has been so long. But yes, I believe that's going to happen. It's going to be different. But I mean, heck, it was every single week. It was like teams that we have no business of hanging around, letting hang around, or even trying to play comeback late in those games. It's like, what are we doing? So yes, I am very excited. I think it'll also be not only, you mentioned like middle of the season, training wheels come off, you're full bore at that point. I mean, there's no questions. I think it's also like you hopefully hit your stride sometime around there. Now, the way the schedule falls based on, and everybody's got predictions. We're all going to be wrong to a certain extent, but it's like, I feels like the middle section is a little bit of a stumbling block just because I could see us losing a couple of those games. You kind of have a win-loss, or so to speak, but still, you have that later the latter part of your schedule with the 6 games of not even having to hop on a plane. I mean, that does bode well, even though we could talk about the bye week and say, not a lot of people would prefer the week 5 bye. It's super early and everything else there. But if the trade-off is, hey, the last 6 weeks, you don't even have to hop on a plane, it's not the worst thing. And you can also, as you're lessening the travel, so hopefully you're still able to stay somewhat fresh. And you also have some games that are very winnable towards the end. So the hope would be you especially, and people talk about peaking at the right time, but really it's just gaining that momentum, shut out some or maybe not shut out, but like blow out some teams that you need to, right? Like New York should not be hanging around. That should be taking care of business. For sure. Carolina, there's some games that we just absolutely need to take care of. And I think it will be different because, as we saw, teams had the blueprint for quite a while, certainly after the Niners game, but for quite a while of, hey, this is what the Eagles are going to do. We know what's coming, so we know how to stop it, and it's going to be the same thing. But this time it'll be different, and as the season gets later, to your point, the confidence is going to grow for both sides of the ball, and I think it'll pay huge dividends later in the year.
Eagle Eye 35 says, any of you see Cataldi say the Eagles will win 5 games and CeeLo saying 7? Philly media drives me crazy. Yeah, if you think the Eagles are going to win 5 games this year, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if Jalen Hurts breaks his leg tomorrow, A.J. Brown gets run over by a truck, and half the team decides to just retire, maybe they win 5 games. But this roster is a lot more than 5 games, and it's the reason why these people don't get any views and nobody watches their shows. So, I mean, come on, you got to at least tell it as it is and not try to be a contrarian just to be a contrarian, right? If you think the Eagles are going to be bad this year, you need to give me actual reasons why, but still say they're going to win 9 or 10 games. I think the floor has got to be 9 or 10 games, and we can all be hit for being a homer this or homer that, but again, look at the roster, Josh. The rosters are as stacked as we have seen them. This roster is better than 2022. It's not close. Like, seriously, it's not close. It's much better than 2022, especially on the offensive side of the football, where we're at year 3, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, a couple years underneath his belt. It's going to be really, really, really fun to watch them play. And to say 5-7 wins is not a surprise from those two, but it's pretty ridiculous.
You're right. It's not a surprise, the contrarian comment and try to get the extra, but yes, I'm with you. The floor, to me, it's 11. I understand if you want to say 10 because it's right there. Shout out to Jay Gates saying the over-under is 10.5. Yes, that's what it's set at. To me, I'd be like, all right, I'm going to take the over for sure. Give me the 11 at a minimum. Maybe it ends up being 13 or 14 games, but I mean, heck, you got a lot of buffer there. So I like that in that situation. But again, everybody's got their takes. Some of them are realistic. Some of them are just throwing it out there to see like who bites, and you never know. Shout out to Johan Lapp, though. I think I said the name correctly. Hopefully I did. But first time watcher says, hey guys, what's up? How's it going?
Johan, what's up? I saw somebody else say, I think it was Joe. He's saying he's driving home from work, right?
Yeah, there you go.
That is?
Yeah. Yep.
There you go.
There you go. Shout out to
Appreciate
Joe.
you guys watching us. We normally do a Wednesday Linc, later on the night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. But since OTAs wrapped up about 45 minutes ago, we decided to hop on and give our overall takeaway from it. I saw somebody mention James Bradberry, who clearly just joined the show. Bradberry was missing, but so was Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson, Keely Ringo, Jake Elliott, C.J. Uzama, and I'm missing one. Josh Sweat. So if we want to rip James Bradberry for not being there, you got to rip those guys too. So I think it's much to do about nothing, but at the same time, that doesn't mean they're not going to get rid of James Bradberry. It just means that James Bradberry is not there right now, and we can't really do much else with that report there. It's not, it's just not a big deal overall. So,
right.
Camden Steele is watching on the school bus. There you go, Camden. Hopefully you had a good day of
let's
school.
Go.
Hopefully you are getting some good grades, though. That's what we want. Do we have the cap space for Micah Parsons? The cap's not real, and so I think you could always make room, but no, they're not going to get Micah Parsons this year. Sorry to burst that bubble, but no,
it is a
not
myth.
Going to happen.
For Howie, the cap is a myth, but it wouldn't surprise me if at some point it happens, but not this season. It's not going to happen.
This season.
But Micah, it just feels inevitable. And as many times as he wants to talk about the Eagles and talk a lot of praise about your division rival and has very little praise to say for his own team. I mean, it's just kind of like the writing's on the wall there, but probably not this year. I would highly doubt that.
I definitely agree. Let me see here in terms of some other quotes that are coming in. Not even on paper is this defense better than the 2022 defense. Do you agree with that, Josh? I just said that this team is better than the 2022 team. Is the defense on paper right now better than the 2022 defense? What do you think? Am I wrong?
It's hard to say because hindsight's 2020, right? Because if we go back and look, then we could make the case. Oh my gosh, of course, like 2022 was so much better. You have some good names but you had question marks too, right? I mean, like we think about like James Bradberry was an All-Pro that year. So, but this year, nobody wants it. We don't want him. Like, right? I mean, most likely you're going to move on from him. But hindsight being 2020, well, you can say, you had your All-Pro in James Bradberry. You had Slay at lockdown level. You had C.J. Gardner-Johnson. You had your defense getting 70 sacks. I mean, it's everything. It's like you had a lot of potential, but then it lived up to that. So when we think back to it, the only thing that is, the 70 sacks, that's hardly ever going to happen ever again. I mean, that's just so much higher than the past. TJ Edwards, I mean, let's be honest, was a huge question mark. He turned out to be phenomenal because he overtook Nakobe Dean, but like no one immediately went into that year saying, heck yeah, we got TJ Edwards there at linebacker. Like there was he was undrafted free agent. He had some potential, but we'd never seen it before. So to take it to that level, or at least on the consistency, and have those guys playing at that type of level, that type of production, I don't know. But I would say maybe it's early. I'm not necessarily on paper would say, but there is lots of potential. And I would say with Fangio, I mean, if JG, let's just put it this way. JG did not maximize. I mean, he got carried by those guys, right? You could go back and look and say that was a great season for the defense. For sure, it was. But he got carried by those guys. And the more people that talked, the more players that talked about what he was doing or maybe not doing, you can tell that. So you have a better defensive coordinator. And in a lot of areas, you can look and say, all right, like is secondary better than that team? It should be. You look at the group here. Now, I know that James Bradberry was an All-Pro, but it's still, you look at it and say it should be better. And then if Devin White returns to form, right, like that's where we're coming off. That's the hard part to compute, because if you take a look at Devin White from last year, then you go, well, it's not good. But if Devin White is returned to form of what we've seen, then yeah, your linebacker is, at least for one of them, is much better than it was for 22. So I think there's just so many question marks of like, can these guys, you got lots of guys with chips on their shoulder, which I love because they got something to prove. But it's the question, are they going to prove it? Are they going to live up to the potential? Or is it going to be, you got some guys who just can't quite do it? And I don't know. Let's go back and forth on it. But it's early,
maybe a better phrase is that we'll look back and they will be better than the 2022 defense was overall. And I think a big form of that is going to be the scheme. Reddick obviously was somebody who, probably tips the favor in terms of the defensive line from that team versus this team, but we don't know what Bryce Huff's going to be. Talk about all the unknowns. What if Bryce Huff gives you 10 sacks this year, right? People will forget about Hassan Reddick very, very quickly and his mega price tag that he wanted in terms of extension that we talked about.
What if Nolan Smith gives you 10 sacks this year? I mean, you never know.
You say that. Sure. Listen, It's easy to be optimistic right now. It's very hard to be a pessimist right now, and I think that's where we're basically all sitting in terms of people who are watching the show right now. 800 people maybe driving home from work, sitting on the school bus. We have to be optimistic, and you have to be optimistic for a bevy of reasons. The Eagles have given you a lot of reasons to feel very confident about this football team, and until they give us reasons not to be confident, until they go to Brazil and get blown out by Jordan Love, or until they're 3-4 through 7 games, then you can start to be a little less optimistic. But on paper, this roster is as good as it comes in the NFC. It's the best in the NFC East. It's very comparable to some of the best rosters in the National Football League. They should be able to win a bunch of games with a 21st hardest schedule. That's good for Philadelphia. I think they're going to be sitting pretty good this time come October, November, whenever we're into the mix of the actual overall season. But it's also extremely early. And so there's just no way to truly know in terms of exactly what you're getting overall in the Eagles offense and defense as it stands right now. Now, the good news is we're going to have a lot more OTA practices. You mentioned you have OTAs coming up here. What are the official OTA dates? Let me just pull that up right now so I can
There's
get
another
this
one
exactly
tomorrow.
right. Another one tomorrow. Unsure if it's open to the practice or to the what do you call it? The
media, yeah. I'm not sure if it is either.
The media
I
or
haven't
not.
seen anyone tweet that it is yet.
I haven't either, but they
never know.
have one tomorrow. Then they're back on the 28th, which is how many days from now? That's next Tuesday. And then they're going to go ahead and have that double dip on the 30th and 31st, which obviously is Thursday and Friday. And then they're back for June 4th through 6th as well. That's a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And so you get a lot more OTA stuff. Eventually, you're going to see a couple of maybe 11 on 11s without pads. A lot of other teams have been doing that. The famous Aaron Rodgers slow-mo pass to Garrett Wilson was an 11 on 11 technically. And so you're going to have a lot more stuff to break down. This is just day one, but the day one takeaways we've been talking about today are still plenty. And there's a lot to go ahead and be excited about. I do think we need to get some people healthy. I mean, Anais Smith needs to be out there. I know he's been battling injuries. He needs to get healthy. You obviously need to get Nakobe Dean back out there as well, coming back from the Liz Frank. Eli Ricks got a little banged up today. He was fine afterwards. Doesn't seem to be a real concern. But people get healthy, and you can start to really see who's going to win what spot, because that's kind of the big battle that's going to happen once you get to training camp.
Yes, absolutely. And it is right now. It's shaking off some rust, which it was interesting, the fact that, I mean, Isaiah Rodgers apparently competed well with Parris Campbell. Like you said earlier, we were talking about, Parris Campbell beat him on a couple. He looked good too, but then Isaiah Rodgers had some plays. So for a guy who has not played in a year, and we talk about where he was playing, I don't know where that was, quite honestly. I would assume that it was on the out. I mean, Isaiah Rodgers was playing on the outside, but Parris Campbell, you kind of assume in the slot, although they were moving A.J. Brown all over the place. So maybe he got aligned somehow. It's hard to say because, we're reading these through tweets and not getting actual footage because unfortunately the Eagles don't want to do that with it. It'd be great if they would. It'd be great if they could just, here's the footage. You can just take a look at it, but we can't. We got to try to speculate and read between the lines, do some research there. But either way, it was apparently several different matchups of Isaiah Rodgers and Parris Campbell. So that is fascinating to me to see where he goes. People talk about, can he play slot? He does have the potential, has not played it much, lines up today at an outside corner position. That's obviously, again, more of his experience and where he's played.
Right.
Is that where the Eagles see him, or does he get moved into the slot some as we go over the next few days and weeks? Who knows? But this is really what it's about. You shake off the rust, get the guys back in the rhythm, make sure you kind of remember things. And then, as Sirianni usually does, you have a last speech of saying, come back in the best shape of your life. And you get a month and a half-ish to kind of relax, but work out a lot and make sure you're in that shape. And then you show up for OTA, or for training camp. So we'll see. The biggest question to me, I guess, on that line of being in shape and conditioning, I know that Jalen Carter talked about it very briefly, or was asked about it in his press conference, that he's in good shape, but also Jordan Davis. I mean, that's the consistent, like every single, past couple years, it's
every year,
the analysis of how does he look based on a picture and an angle and everything else. Like, you could do a lot of things with different pictures, right? Like, you could go back and look at pictures of Jordan Davis and say, wow, like that, he's in incredible shape. And then like 2 days later, look at another picture and go, my gosh, what happened?
Donuts,
it's hard to say, but I've got to hope, I've got to believe, if you're going to be motivated, it should have been last season. He talked about it. He knows the writing's on the wall. Fletch is gone. You got to step up. Is he going to make that jump? he doesn't need to be, I've seen some people saying like, oh, why can't he up his pass production or pass rush production? He doesn't need to necessarily. Like it should be serviceable and then
Right.
stop the run like he can, but it needs to be availability and playing more snaps because Fangio typically likes that for his defenses. And also, I mean, JD admitted he was not up to the shape to be able to play a full schedule. So it changes. Year 3, you got to get it done. If you're winning contract extension, we know what Howie Roseman does. He likes to extend it early. This is really, to me, the season where you show something or the question marks that are there start to really turn into red flags. So I don't know. I'm hopeful for JD, but that'll be the biggest question. Can he stay conditioned? Does he even get more conditioned by training camp and then be able to lead that up into a full season?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm hopeful too, but the past 2 seasons have told us not to expect much. I mean, in terms of actually being in shape and being in, conditioning and being in the right conditioning to where you aren't tired week 12. And that was the whole, rip on him. Brian Baldinger famously mentioning how out of shape he was during the latter half of that season. But he's going to be a big factor in the Eagle defensive line being really good or very average. I think if he is the player we expected him to be, he can fill some shoes left by, the holes of Fletcher Cox on the defensive line. This defensive line is going to be very good. It's going to be a lot better than people think with Hassan Reddick being gone and obviously, Fletcher Cox being gone as well. But if he's the same old Jordan Davis, then it's going to be a little more average than I think a lot of us would hope. So we shall see.
Yes.
Super chat here from Isaac Torres. What do you guys think is preventing the Eagles making another big signing? Are they holding out hopes of getting players to drop asking prices? I think that, and I think that they want to see what they have, right? Do they need to go get a Justin Simmons at safety, or do they like Reed Blankenship? Well, let's see what you have during training camp. Do you need to go get a, Calais Campbell, or do you like where Jordan Davis's weight is at? I think that's what they're waiting on right now. And a lot of these guys, Calais Campbell, Justin Simmons, they're over the age of 30. A full training camp is not necessarily fun. People talk about historically how, training camps are tough. I don't really want to be at training camp. But Dominican Sue, a great example of that. I think Campbell would wait till, week 2 or 3 of training camp is over, roll in, and then be good to go. And I wouldn't be surprised if the same goes for Justin Simmons. I think he's probably holding out for an injury, but it could be because he didn't want to go through a full training camp as well at 31 years old or whatever age he says at the current out point of the season.
Right. Yes. Totally understandable. You would like, if you can, again, as a veteran, you know what you're going through. You don't really have to have that extra motivation. I mean, you know the rigors of the NFL season to get your body in shape, be able to produce. So I'm with you. If there is something, again, if it ends up being where a player gets injured or you do need that depth, it feels like it would be later on in the year. But unfortunately for guys like a Jordan Davis, it's you got to use all the time that you get, extra sprints. Yeah, whatever you can to be enough in shape. Also, I mean, I guess say like, here's, the bread man needs to keep Jordan Davis away from the bread. Like just hold him accountable. It was supposed to be the other way whenever they first got signed, but it feels like the reverse of that, really. I mean, yes, I'm sure there's a lot of accountability. They're great for each other and everything else, but like JD needs to be as much working out whatever Jalen Carter does and be held accountable, because he's talked about before that it's easier to go and get a workout in with somebody else because I think he called himself a social butterfly. It's easy to see like he loves to be around people, but like some people are more motivated, and I totally get it. Like I get more, I think a lot of people do. I get a little bit more out of it if you're working out with a group of people than you are individually. So that's fine. And everyone can knock. Yes, he's making millions of dollars and he's a first round draft pick. He shouldn't have that lack of motivation, but whatever. He has the ability to go work out with other players. That means go for the, month and a half before training camp, go down to Florida and work out with Jalen Carter. Go do that. Whatever you have to do to keep yourself accountable and work out. Hopefully this is the time. And again, I know you mentioned it and we've said it many, many times. It's the same old so far for JD, but it is now or never. So hopefully he makes that difference. Milton Williams, we will say, I hope that Milton Williams gets more snaps, because I do believe he can make an impact, as can our guy Gabe Hall and Morijomo as well. But I hope Gabe makes the roster. I will say that.
I do too. I hope Morijomo, shows himself this year, because he basically was, non-existent this past season. But you don't expect much from a late round defensive lineman. But still, this is the year for Milton. This is the year for Davis. This is for Jomo. I mean, all of them are definitely, high up on that list overall. So All right, we are tipping up close to the top of the hour. If you missed the beginning of this show, it will go ahead and loop. That way you can, hear our thoughts on James Bradberry, who is not at OTAs, at least today. Will he be there tomorrow? I don't think so. We don't know yet, but we're going to have full breakdowns of day one, at least media day one of OTAs on our shows this evening. And, of course, full breakdowns going forward the rest of the weekends. Be sure to subscribe for both of those. Giveaways happening as well on both of our channels, as we normally do. The best Eagle coverage you guys can find, it's on both of these shows, and we appreciate you guys watching for us today. For Josh Davis, I'm Thomas Mott. Wednesday Linc live as we sign off here at the top of the hour, or top of the hour for us, but we'll see you guys next week for our next live show.
There you go. Go Birds.